Thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome to Campus Consortium Foundation's EdTech Think Tank webinar series on how the FAFSA Simplification Act impacts students and schools. If you have any questions now or during today's presentation, please type them into the chat box or questions pane in the Zoom control panel. Now, I would like to pass the platform to Dr. Carl Horvath, President and CEO at Campus Consortium Foundation.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you everyone for logging in to today's webinar. We have a great panel of guest speakers today. Carrie Huber, Director of Student Financial Services from the University of Mary, Callie Zake, Director of Undergraduate Admissions and Financial Aid at Lourdes University, and we also have Kirk Yetz, Senior Business Analyst at Dynamic Campus, to help give us all some insight into the pending changes of the FAFSA application. This is the largest, the most significant change in 40 years to this form, and it will have impacts on all your institutions. And in particular, we're going to focus on the technology-related changes, but also the general changes too. I would like to kind of move on to talk a little bit about Campus Consortium very quickly. This is our webinar. Campus Consortium has been around for a while. We've really developed our mission and our vision statement over the past 3 years to make sure that it aligns with education. And we have a great membership of mostly higher education institutions, but a fast-growing K-12 school district membership as well, and some nonprofit institutions that we also support that are related to education. If you'd like to find out more, please contact us. We have many programs and services, and our mission is a 3-part mission. That is to deal with the affordability of technology and education. It is the access to technology and education. And the third is how to provide innovation to institutions. And that's all institutions, large, small, public, private. We help all education institutions because our mission is to advance education. I am going to hit you with a few poll questions here on today's webinar. We collect this data. It takes us time, but we will create a report of this in a PDF format that we will send to everyone who attended. And the poll questions are the first step in analyzing data and then presenting this in that report. It's also useful in this presentation to get an idea of what you, the attendees, are doing in your schools, and our panelists could analyze some of your answers that will pop up on the screen, and they can comment on them. Otherwise, we will make sure you get the full report at a later date. Our first poll question for the day: is your institution prepared for the FAFSA application simplification? Just a simple question: yes, somewhat, not started, or no. This will help all the peer institutions that are attending really get an idea of where they are in relation to the rest of the educational institutions. And if you would please just take 30 seconds to answer this question. We'll post the results immediately, and then we can move on to the next slide. So what we are addressing today is the FAFSA simplification. The major impacts are, it's a major redesign, and the redesign is meant to address students. It's for increasing the usability, changing eligibility requirements, and addressing populations of students that were perhaps underserved in the past. And these changes will help other populations of students that may not have had the full advantage of the FAFSA. This will mean impacts on your institutions, how you speak and communicate with students, and of course, websites, systems that are configured in a specific way will need to be changed and addressed. Here's our poll question results. Is your institution prepared? Well, we have 9% of folks say yes, we're pretty much there. A lot of people have been working on it, but they're just not quite where they need to be. So we got about 46%. Some folks just started. I know a couple institutions I'm working with now that just started. And some folks, understandably, just haven't gotten it going yet, and that's 17%. So that's a great mix of folks. Hopefully it makes you feel better that not everybody is at the, yes, we're done and ready to go stage, that everybody's in different stages. So we're going to move on here about the new questions will be demographic questions. There's provisional determination and expanded student eligibility. Impacts will be the federal Pell Grant changes we'll hear more about from our panelists, student aid index calculation changes, new cost of attendance calculations will change, and all this has to be updated on websites and communication to students from institutions. And then this will have to be made publicly available. And there's going to be a lot of work for the financial aid office and those that support the office, like information technology. So some of the specific technology impacts will be on student information systems, and those of you who have student information systems likely heard from your contacts about some of the impacts on your student information systems. The SISs are the record for the entire institution. And so any impacts to your SIS will maybe impact other departments too. So this is a big project to address. Workflow, business processes, reporting, analytics, and of course, security, personally identifiable information, and many other areas that have to be addressed when working on this project. So it's really it's a project that includes multiple stakeholders, and we'll hear more about project and project management and change management a little bit later from one of our panelists. So a lot to do, but we have some good information for you. FSA resources here. When you get the slide deck, you can access it. These are out there and available, and you're welcome to them. Next poll question before we get started: is your institution's financial aid department working with the information technology department for FAFSA simplification? Yes, somewhat, no. Or maybe you're working with an IT consultant. It's not your internal IT. If you could just take 30 seconds to answer that, we'd greatly appreciate that. And let's welcome our panelists today, which I already introduced. And we'll start with our first presenter, who is Callie Zake. Callie is the Director of Admissions and Financial Aid at Lourdes University in Sylvania, Ohio. She started as a student worker in the financial aid office and then moved up to the Director of Financial Aid 5 years ago, and she moved into her current role 3 years ago. Who better than a student to be Director of Admissions and Financial Aid? That is a wonderful journey that you took, Callie. I am very impressed with that, and I think that's perfect for your institution. So it sounds like you've focused on implementing literacy programs, and so that's what I hear from a lot of schools: documentation, training, understanding your financial. Many students don't, and that's a wonderful program. And also making data-driven enrollment decisions, very important for institutions. Callie has a BA in psychology, much needed in education today, and an MBA, perfect balance because you're looking at the business side. And I love this ending that she lives with her husband, 3 kids, 3 cats, and 2 dogs. So that's you have a lot to handle, Callie. Here's the results of our second poll question. Is your institution financial aid department working with the information technology department for FAFSA simplification? 27% say yes, somewhat is 35, no is 33, and 5% is working with an IT consultant. Again, kind of evenly divided, so everybody's got a different take on how they're approaching this. So Callie, I would like to hand this off to you, and please take it away.
All right, thank you, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. So this is just a little screen grab from FSA that just gives an overview. We're going to kind of talk about some of the overarching changes, and then just some little commentary on how we're doing it at Lourdes and just some of my thoughts on it. So the main point of the FAFSA Simplification Act was to make aid more accessible to students, make the FAFSA easier to file. I know a lot of us in financial aid probably have a lot of students who start the FAFSA and it's overwhelming, or they already think it's overwhelming and don't want to do it. We always hear about millions of federal dollars being left on the table because students aren't doing what's needed. So to me, the big point of this is to make it more accessible so more students can get funding for college. So obviously these changes are going to be going into effect for this upcoming aid year. One of the big things that's making this easier for students is that what used to be 108 plus questions is now 36. So it's a lot easier for students to answer those questions. Also, the FSA has kind of the walkthrough of what it looks like already. And if you look at it, a lot of the questions are more explanatory to students instead of like financial aid administrators. So it explains who your parent would be. It explains what your grade level would be, what your number in your family, things like that. So it's a little more explanatory to students, makes it easier for them to actually answer the questions and not get worried about it. A lot of the questions are now aligned with the students' taxes and the parents' taxes, so the information is automatically transferred over. There's not multiple steps to get to that point. Students and parents obviously have to agree for that to happen at a certain point on the FAFSA. But it's a very smooth process going into the questions instead of having to go to multiple websites. The one point of this that the Department of Ed is saying is that it's going to reduce the likelihood of verification. I think it'll probably also increase professional judgments for schools, just because we're going to have to be updating, things like number in college or parent income, dependency, things like that. So that will be kind of like the flip side of it. But on the student end, again, it's going to be easier. The new Pell Grant formulas are out there. So they have the maximum and the minimum Pell. One impact for, I think, a lot of rural colleges is going to be the reporting of family farms. This isn't such a huge issue in like Sylvania, Ohio, but you get to like North Dakota where a family farm is more prevalent, Carrie knows, then this is going to be a problem for those students, and kind of figuring out how to do that. Again, maybe a professional judgment, something like that. One of the big things that I keep hearing is the number in college. So it's still going to be a question on the FAFSA, but it's not going to be calculated within the student aid index. So kind of working with that in a professional judgment as well, maybe reducing income to account for paying for college expenses. So one of the major points is expanding the Pell Grant for more students, giving more students access to it, and kind of linking that to the poverty level. So they're looking at, for the maximum Pell Grant, if you are at 225% poverty level, then you are automatically getting maximum Pell Grant. It's dependent, independent, broken up like that. So it's a very easy, if you're low income, the negative SAI that will now exist. Then it's maximum Pell Grant. Students will be able to kind of get maybe what their Pell Grant could be based on this, just because of that automatic maximum Pell Grant. If they're not required to file taxes because of their income level, that's maximum Pell Grant. If they know their state's poverty standards or can look those up, and they fall within that threshold, then they would also get it.
Callie?
Yeah.
Got a quick question for you from the attendees.
Okay.
And no need to answer. If we don't know, we'll get them the information afterwards, but just wanted to throw that out there. There was a question from Andrea Lowe that asked, does high school teach kids about FAFSA? And somebody answered yes, so maybe another high school does that, but are there programs that you know of?
Yeah, so all states will have what's their Association of Financial Aid. So like Ohio is OASFA. And high schools can reach out to OASFA, MASFA, whatever your ASFA is in your state. And they have a list, NASFA, I believe, has it as well, where they have a list of colleges that will come to your high school and give presentations on financial aid. So at Lourdes, we have local high schools that we go to every year where we go and do this. So absolutely, you just have to connect with your Association of Financial Aid Advisors.
Fantastic. And another attendee has a question because on a previous slide, you noted this, and they said, why would there be a decrease in eligibility when you have more than one student in college? Wouldn't you need more assistance when you have multiple students attending college?
That is a question. So in the
Yes.
FAFSA Simplification Act, they have said that they are not going to be asking that, that it's still there, but they're not calculated into the student aid index. I think it was the FSA webinar had said that there are other ways you can get around it with a professional judgment where you can account for income being paid for college. But that's going to be on the financial aid administrator's side. So it's the government. That's the baseline answer.
Yes, we know. All right. Carrie, anything to add, or Kirk?
Sure. I was going to say, to piggyback on what Callie said, I think this change is really to say that your children's birth orders shouldn't matter anymore. However, I do think, coming from a family perspective and knowing that I have multiples, going that I'm going to have 2 children in college, and how do I, taking that away is concerning. So with Callie saying that she and I will probably be friends later, talking, drinking coffee over pizza.
Great.
Carl, I might add that
yes.
Callie was correct in saying this wasn't something that the financial aid population and professionals have really taken a liking to. It's really coming out of Congress, and the Department of Education has to enforce the laws that our friends in Washington, D.C. put together. It is, in this particular case, it is a very big point of consternation. It may not affect millions of students, but the families that it does impact will see a pretty significant change in their eligibility, which is unfortunate.
Great perspective. Thank you for the feedback and addressing those questions. I'm going to move you on to your next slide, Callie.
Perfect. So the expectation now at this point is that the FAFSA will open in December. There has not been a specific date that I have seen, but probably best to assume it's going to be around the last week. But just because it's only a few months away, there's still things that can be started. So getting all like the cost of attendance, the federal work study, all of those other changes within the FAFSA changes ready. I think, and I know Carrie's going to talk about this, but just getting like your entire campus involved, letting them know, kind of getting with the new lingo, SAI, FTI, things like that, making that shift. So one of the major things that we've covered already, but that there's going to be an increase in the amount of Pell Grants and the recipients. So we'll see how this plays out with the SAI, with some of those changes and coming directly from that. And also, like I mentioned, the amount of professional judgments that the financial aid office has to do to hopefully get to more students getting Pell. But there's also going to be negative impacts. So I think some of the big ones are going to be the enrolled in college. That's something that families have relied on. Obviously, you are, paying for one kid to go to college. You add another on top of that. That's income that's no longer there. The family farm, family business that hasn't historically been counted. There are ways that the financial aid administrator is able to, get information to fix that with a professional judgment. Another thing that I think will be an issue that high school administrators and financial aid advisors should start thinking of is we have a lot of parents who don't always take the time to help their students and go on and file the FAFSA with them. So with the change, the student is going to list the parent as a contributor, and then the parent is going to get a separate email for them to log on and put their information in. And there are some parents who don't want to do a lot at this point. So I think a concern is that there's going to be students waiting for, that last piece of information that historically they could just, flow through the FAFSA. So we'll see what those impacts are, but again, hopefully better for students. So a big part of this is making sure that you're ready on all facets. And I think having, you know, the good IT department, we partner with Dynamic Campus, has been helpful just because it's not just me and my team looking at the changes. It's also our IT department who's finding things and sending them to me. You know, finding webinars that would be helpful. You know, keeping in contact with our system, making sure that they're on track to implement changes. So, you know, using technology to help, you know, with the goal of getting the FAFSA ready so that, you know, hopefully January 2nd, 3rd, we can start pulling students FAFSAs in. So we'll see. But I think just the big thing is making sure it's not just a singular person, but the team working together to get this ready.
Carl, you're on mute.
Carl,
is
you're on
this,
mute.
yeah, is this a question I'm supposed to? I
My
thought this was one
God,
of their polls.
everybody does this, right? You got to do it once a day. You got to be on mute. So my apologies. Thank you very much, Callie. Great job on explaining that. And I appreciate Carrie and Kirk, you adding commentary there. Is there anything else anybody wants to address as Callie closes out her section? All right, I'm going to, well, we are posting the next poll question, and that is, who is working on FAFSA simplification in your institution? Select all that apply. Who's the team that is responsible for making these significant changes? Financial aid, student services, IT, consultant, registrar, finance, nonprofit org, or peer institution collaboration, and other. And if you could just take 30 seconds to answer that, we'd greatly appreciate that. Be interesting to see who you're working with to get this done as a team. All right, our next panelist is Carrie Huber. Carrie is the Director of Student Financial Services at the University of Mary, where she spends her working hours focusing on compliance, office leadership and administration, taking in a meeting or four, as we all do these days, and developing better ways to say, it depends. She is known for being aggressively friendly. And I said to Carrie, that should be a job requirement for folks when you're posting for a job, and often soothes her frazzled nerves with handfuls of Reese's Pieces. Love peanut butter. Thank you for that. She's active in both her state and regional financial aid associations. Sounds great, Carrie. And before we hand it over to you, I'd like to report on the results of our third poll. Who's working on FAFSA simplification in your institution? Select all that apply. And of course, 77% is financial aid. The next largest group that they're working with at 42% is information technology. And then the group after that would be student services. And this is decreasing in a number of departments and participation. External consultants, 15%, registrar, 5%, finance, 9%, and others, nonprofit orgs at 1%. So great feedback, very interesting results. It looks like most financial aid departments are working with IT. Carrie, I'd like to hand it over to you. Please take it away.
All right, so it looks like I get to talk to everybody about the Student Aid Information Gateway, or SAG. I don't know about you, but I kind of have a love-hate relationship with this. But with FAFSA simplification and to be able to bring in our new 24-25 ICERs, we actually have to enroll in what I think of my brain as a new mailbox. Looking into this, the reason we need to is because of FTI, so that's federal tax information. So just mark that down on your cheat sheet of all the new terms that we have to learn. That, you know, I've spent the last decade understanding. So the goal of FTI, it's going to be particular for transmitting these ICERs, because now that the 24-25 ICER is students and their contributors are giving consent to pass that information on, this is now falling also under IRS regulations, so it's going to be controlled and classified information. So you will have your regular mailbox still. So you get all your Pell and direct loan and reconciliation files, and then you'll have the separate mailbox where that'll just be for the 24-25 ICERs and beyond. This will require you to work with your IT. So if you're like, our IT, we'll have to get our cheat sheet out to remember how we upgrade Ed Connect again. That's what we use at our campus, but Ed Connect, TD Client, TD Community Manager, all of those releases will be forthcoming. Next slide. Now, everyone that has a SAG box, we will have to sign a new agreement. And this agreement should be available on October 23rd. I say should because I was hoping all of this would have been available a long time ago so we could have a little bit more of a ramp, but we'll mark our calendars. The updated agreement does include an acknowledgement of criminal and civil penalties for unauthorized inspection or disclosure of FTI, so federal tax information. Remember, this is all a part of that being secure and that it's coming directly from the IRS. So your destination point administrator who manages the ICER service must sign the enrollment agreement. And this could be the same person as your primary DPA, or it could be someone else. At my institution, I serve in both roles. And then you would also need your president or CEO's signature.
Carrie, could I interject with the audience question or attendee question? I'm going to ask on behalf of Rodney Holloway, who said, how will it change the application of work study? Many students can qualify, but don't check the options as if it will reduce the amount of aid they get. And I'm just opening it up to anybody that can address that.
I'll start and then I can pass it over to you, Callie, if you want. So my understanding of this, and I'm learning right along everybody else, is, our calculation of aid is going to change because we're going to use the SAI instead of the EFC. But the student would you're still going to fill with the different resources to fill that need. Is that yours, Callie? Okay.
Yes.
All right. And then Heather Jorgen asked, what documents can we get that help prepare parents to access in order to appropriately answer questions about their net value of a business or farm?
Oh, this is one that I've been toying with, and I'm actually glad you said that because I'm in North Dakota, so I'm on the prairie, and we have a number of families that have small business farms, things of this, and I'm struggling from the perspective on what we should do. And the best that I can tell them is to go back to a tax professional because I'm not in a position to properly evaluate what a combine is worth. And I feel a little guilty that I have to ask a family to value a combine because I know that's not putting food on their table, other than like it's not physically buying groceries and things of that nature. It's used for work. So I would say we're going to have to ask families for to go to a tax professional. That is also challenging because there's an increased cost there. So I'm not really sure how we're going to broach that question yet.
Yeah, I think a lot of these questions, the revisions don't take into account the impacts that it will have on students and their families.
Kirk, do you have an idea?
Carl, can I interject something here regarding that?
Oh,
question?
absolutely. Kirk, please.
Yeah, let me read the instructions from the draft FAFSA as far as what the feds have said about valuing net worth. The instructions on the FAFSA as far as net worth is concerned, it says net worth means the current value as of today of investments, businesses, and or investment farms minus debts related to those same investments. When calculating net worth, use 0 for investments or properties with a negative value. So I think during the NASFA conference, the conventional wisdom was that most schools were telling parents and students to use their best judgment as far as the current value. Not necessarily use an equalized value or some other value, but just their best guess, along with what the debt is on that particular investment. So I think it may be rather subjective for most families and parents, but the overarching goal there was not to overvalue their farms and businesses.
Great, thank you for that. And just very quickly, there's a comment, two comments I'd like to just quickly put out there if we could briefly answer them. One is from Howard Leslie, who asks, I'd love to know how people are handling the number in college issue. Or is that another government question that's been revised without taking into account the impacts of what that revision would create for students and families?
I'll start, team. My opinion is the change to that question, I don't think has been properly thought out. So again, leaning on what Kirk said, Congress made this decision. These are the questions we're going to ask, and these changes, I don't think we've properly reflected on how that's going to affect families. I know at my institution, we have a number of families that they have multiple kids in school at the same time, and it's a deep concern on how we're going to serve those students who have come accustomed to that need-based funding to help them afford their education, and suddenly we'll see that that's no longer an option for them.
Okay, just one more quick question, Kirk, Carrie, and Callie. Will, Catherine Miranda is asking, will this affect professional and graduate schools very much?
I'll just say for my understanding, it wouldn't, because it's more of an SAI. The cost of attendance may, but most grad school is kind of that set on sub amount, and then plus another loans up to cost of attendance. But you can always do a professional judgment for cost of attendance changes as well.
Mostly
Correct.
this will be undergraduate, right? I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry, Carrie.
Correct. I was going to say the only time I would think there would be a change is the only need-based fund that graduate students would be eligible for if the institution participates in is work study. And so I know we have a handful of graduate students that do work study at our institution, but it's pretty limited just because that's not something that is of interest with our population. So I don't see a lot of changes other than a different set of hoops, or maybe having to get consent from their spouse or something as a contributor.
And Carl, it may have some impact on professional schools. A lot of medical schools and professional schools will ask for parent dependent or even independent parent income as a means to award some of their institutional aid. So with the 24-25 year, independents will not be, even if they put in the parent information, that will not be processed by the federal processor. So the schools that, professional schools that used to receive that information will not get it next year.
Yeah, major impacts here. Well, thank you all for addressing those questions. I just have one comment that was provided by one of our attendees back to our question about high school and students and education about FAFSA. They don't have a name, but they say California is a state. There's a state mandate that school counselors teach about the FAFSA in the junior year. So I guess across California, that state, I guess that doesn't apply to every state. So that's a good thing to get students thinking about that sooner than later. Carrie, I'm just going to hand it back over to you.
Okay, so let's start talking about enrollment, and then I'll lean on Callie because I know she deals with this every day if there's something that I've missed. I think it's important, if you haven't, to have this conversation with your administration so that you lay the foundation of the expectation. So us historically, when the FAFSA started coming in October, we started awarding earlier and trying to get things through, and so we could move from the admissions perspective, help students make that decision and commitment sooner. And part of what I've done with my administration is let them know that, our apple cart is going to be upset for this year. Where I firmly I expect the 24-25 FAFSA to be a New Year's baby for us. So that's what I've communicated to my basically my administration, the May 1st decision date, that gives me a little bit of heart palpitation because we have a shorter runway for families to get in front of families, show them that college is affordable and accessible, and here's how we can do it. Because even if the FAFSA comes out end of December, I'm not sure how fast as institutions we can turn on a dime to do that. So part of right now, what we've done at University of Mary to prepare is talk about how we want to align our institutional scholarships. Do we want to make changes to our need-based awarding? You know, now that we're looking at negative SAI, max Pell, minimum Pell, what does that do? We have, you know, will that change our campus base allocation? Man, I wish I would get more SCOG. I'll pray for all of us. So just to make sure that we can meet students where they are with the best offer. And that's not just our new recruits, that's our current students, because we know that there is a class that came in this year with the promise of certain need-based aid that maybe next year won't have it. And how can we serve them? Because that's part of their affordability piece.
Carrie and team, please, Myra Gonzalez is asking, and this will help a lot of folks attending today. Could you please define FCI again?
FCI or FTI?
FC as in cat, I. Federal.
I think it probably means FTI.
Yeah, I was going to say it might be FTI, and that's federal tax information.
Okay, got it. Maybe, yeah, we heard it incorrectly or typed it incorrectly, but yeah, that sounds familiar to me. Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. FTI. T and C sound very similar sometimes. All right, and another quick question from Michelle Kiefer, who's asking, how will divorced and non-custodial parents verify/prove who provides the most financial support?
Oh, this is a very interesting question and something that we have been debating in our office going, okay, so it's no longer down to where does a student reside, it's now down to who provides the most financial support. And so we kind of started asking students in our mind who's providing the support, where we'll go down to who provides your health insurance, who's paying for this and groceries. And the change in the way I understand it is now who's even paying child support. That can be contributed to. You're providing more support, even though that's a way that the other parent provides it. So I think we're going to have to use our best judgment and go down to who is actually funding those bills and making those payments for the student.
Thank you. All right, just before we get to your next slide, Carrie, I just wanted to interject with a few comments from our attendees, just to go back to the high school education, because I would imagine your financial aid offices see a lot of students that are unprepared to really understand about financial aid. And it's you know, just not to put down math, but it's like taking a math class, you know, it's like, I really got to try to understand this and I have no interest in it, and I don't blame them. But there is an attendee who is Zuli Vidal, and Zuli is from Knoll Academy in Providence, Rhode Island. And looks like Knoll Academy has a post-secondary success department at their school, and it introduces college prep curriculum such as FAFSA 101 as early as the 9th grade. And the statement ends with "the earlier the better!" ! So I'm sure getting that information out, even if it's not understood, is important early on. And the other quick comment is Jaron Beaver says, sounds like this might be a win for community colleges who offer lower tuition for the first 2 years. Maybe it'll pump their enrollment up a little bit, because of some of the students that don't get the aid that they need will find another way. But interesting observation. All right, let me move you to your next slide, Carrie.
And I kind of mentioned this a little bit, but if the institution packages gift funds, which certainly just, what are our plans? I have looked at SAI calculators and estimators, and so right now my institution is planning to increase our institutional gift funds. It's just something that we will be doing so we can meet our commitment to the students that we're trying to retain, to continue to make a private education affordable. So our impact, I guess that means we're spending more money. We're opening that checkbook. And we do use an award matrix. Why we use in a matrix is we're trying to make it as equitable as possible, I would say. And so what we have chosen to make very little tweaks to our matrix. And a lot of it is, I haven't finalized any decisions on how we're going to do it because everything has always been based on EFC, and I've made a few changes to be based on SII, but I really kind of feel like we're going to have to make those decisions on the aid office in the stream because we don't have a point of reference yet. How will we ensure enrollment success? You know, I don't have a perfect answer. I think the best thing that we can do right now for the students that we're hoping to bring in and to retain is just to communicate. So one of the things we've mentioned about high school that I think is important, and I don't know that it's necessarily available right now, one of the ways contributors, so parents, spouses, will acknowledge their consent to FAFSA change is through their FSA user, FSA ID, so that username and password configuration. What I've heard is that families should be able to do that prior to the launch of the 24-25 FAFSA. I'm seeing Callie shake her head, so that makes me feel better. And that is one of the things that I've been communicating. Now is the time for families to do that because that is step one so they can get started. They have that because I do believe there's going to be a little bit of a delay in time when you set it up to when it's validated to when the consent. So that would certainly simplify the process. And then I think the other part that we're trying to do is really get our undergraduate admissions team to adjust their language and understand SAI replaced EFC and understand what this means for our families and help us in the financial aid office bring those families that maybe we could support through professional judgment so we can have that dialogue. So they would introduce us or do the warm transfer or something. And then in our community, one of the things our campus does is we do at our local high schools at conferences, we call it Ask an Aid Professional. So each of us take a turn, we sit around the high school at the conferences, and it just gives families, even the high school professionals, a chance to ask that question that doesn't make sense. And the goal is not to increase UMary enrollment, but to increase this number of students that go to college. Change management. So Carl, you queued me up on this one. It is very important that I allocate a budget to make sure my team is trained and they all have training and they have adequate training that meets them where they are. So when I say meets them where they are, I know I have people that the idea of getting on an airplane makes them, you know, itchy. So we won't do that. So it's definitely important that we do that, but also with changing and helping that the financial aid team is not the only part in this puzzle. So we need to make sure that we're educating the rest of our community. So making sure that we have a member of our financial aid team has a chance to sit at the table with undergraduate admissions so they know what changes. We have a non-traditional adult population. How is that going to affect them? Talking with we've met with the different deans of our schools so they understand the implications to their students, what this will mean to them, and then really helping my hope is to get a cheat sheet out to people so they understand the definitions, what we're talking about, and how this can affect our families. Because again, number in college will be a big hit for us, and evaluating the family farm. And technology. I guess I don't think of Dynamic Campus as a vendor. They're my coworkers down the hall. They're the friends that I'm instant messaging going, oh my gosh, I broke EdConnect again. Can you help me? Or other software. So to me, they're my neighbor down the hall and colleague, and I value them very much. I also value, I've got a chance to work with Kurt and some other team members from our shared services team, and I really appreciate their perspective. As far as how they've applied technology to solve goals, we're working hand in hand. So they're right there reminding me that it's time for an upgrade, or do I have this, or I saw that. There's an amazing checklist, kind of daunting too, that Dynamics Campus has shared that reminds me, you need to do this, you have to change this by this date, you should be on this. So it's definitely them supporting me. And I was super impressed with that, because it let me know that even though we're all on the same, we're all on this together and we're in different boats and everything, there's a partner that's kind of helping me out here, reminding me what we do. Yeah, and then I guess with our dynamic team, one of the big things, and I know Kirk will do this, I appreciate having somebody that understands GLBA as well as they do.
All right, Carrie, thank you. Yes, you can't do it all yourself, right? It's just too much, especially when we get changes like this. They're massive projects, and I love how you're taking the perspective that it is a project and there's stakeholders and there's a lot of tasks and schedules to address. So you, in a way, become a project manager for this, and you can be an island if you're the only one really driving this ahead and communicating and connecting the rest of the university. So absolutely work with somebody like Kirk can be very helpful because there's somebody to lean on. So thank you for that. I am going to move to our next poll question, but first, well, let's see. Institutions have broad flexibility in exercising professional judgment in the FAFSA simplification process. Does this impact institutional workflow and department resources? Meaning, I think that part of this was in reading about the FAFSA and some of the research we saw that there, and Carrie and Kirk, you can absolutely, correct me if I'm wrong or redefine it, but the decision making on the part of financial aid has changed, and I don't know if it's more specific. It sounds like it's more vague. And so if it is more vague in making those decisions about aid, does that impact your workflows differently? And I'm just going to put this out there for the audience. You guys can answer as needed, but yes, somewhat, minimally, or no.
As a panelist, Carl, I can answer it. I would select yes.
Yeah, I mean, so much of the simplification impacts everything we do. So it looks like, yeah, most of the folks are saying yes and agreeing with you somewhat. So yes and somewhat. I mean, those are impacts, or minimally. All three are. Some say, oh, not much, but in any way, shape, or form, even dealing with this project is an impact, right? So on more than just financial aid. All right, so we're going to move to our next presenter, Kirk, who's going to wrap this all up for us and give his very broad perspective on financial aid because he works with so many institutions. I just would like to, before introducing you, Kirk, just a few comments from the audience. And we do have some questions. And I'm just going to get to the ones here real quick. We'll answer all questions. We'll follow up, but right now, let's see. Is it true, from Celeste McCormick, is it true that each institution must host its own net price calculator, or can we just link to a public one?
My understanding is from the Higher Ed Authorization Act that you have to host it on your website.
It's actually got to be, yeah, every institution I've been at, you've had to have your own net price calculator. One more quick question. Will students who have been disowned by their parents be able to apply for FAFSA now?
There is the option to have them be declared independent and given an SAI, but it has to be go through the dependency process with the financial aid administrator before it can be validated, essentially. But they can be given a provisional independence.
Okay. Leah Williams also asked, where can the schools get a copy of that checklist? Isn't that checklist on the federal government website? Can we send that link? The checklist, FAFSA checklist.
So are you talking about the checklist I mentioned? So that's internal,
Yes.
just to remind me of different things, but there is definitely, I can share with you, Carl, a few of the checklists that I share with the high schools. Just to kind of, here are some things that you should be doing now, here are some things later. So
Great.
I'll share it to you that we can share with the community.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. And if you want, you could just put it in the, I think the Q&A where everybody will get it, but we'll certainly share that out on your behalf to the community. All right, Kirk. Kirk is the former director of the Office of Scholarships and Financial Aid at Central Michigan University, where he had the honor of leading an operation that administered over $340 million in financial aid annually. Wow. Kirk has over 30 years of experience in financial aid. Over the years, he's been active in state, regional, and national associations. And Kirk joined Dynamic Campus as a senior business analyst in January of 2022. And in Kirk's current role, he collaborates with campus partners to identify opportunities to increase efficiencies in administering student financial aid. And it looks like that Carrie and Callie were kind of addressing that support that Kirk helps them with and many other institutions. And Kirk, I'm going to hand it over to you. Please take it away.
Thank you, Carl. Appreciate that. First, I want to thank Callie and Carrie for providing such great information in such a compressed time frame. The FAFSA simplification is far from simple, and they've done a great job of giving you some of the highlights that you need to pay attention to. As we mentioned before, financial aid touches many other areas within the institution. And in many cases, many times, it's been my experience that sometimes the communication doesn't flow as freely as it should, and some areas are left out of the loop. So it's very important to, as you move forward with this simplification plan, to bring in other areas and make sure they're informed on a regular basis. It includes your CIO, your IT staff, even your president. So they're all aware of some of the challenges and time frame constraints you may have. Particularly, you need to stay in close contact with your ERP vendors. They're getting information. They're getting the new releases for software. They've been involved for a while now, so they should be providing you with an update as to your new software layouts, your schema changes, getting you some software to test as far as the new ICERs are concerned. And again, there's many offices that the aid office will either submit reports to or provide information to or be asked to give information. You need to set some time to really pay attention and make contact with those other areas so that you can check up all of your internal programs. If you're running queries or ad hoc reporting, or all of your integrations are going to had to be looked at because the file layout's changing of the ICER. These FAFSA changes also will affect other areas within your school, your CRM. If you have a data warehouse, your admissions office will be, impacted by the change as well registrar, and the fact that the housing question was taken off the FAFSA for 24-25 leaves your housing colleagues in sort of lurch. So you need to really, reach out to those areas at this point or soon, and try to identify areas or solutions or workarounds to identify things like what the student housing status will be for the 24-25 year. It's also important to make sure you're staying updated on patches and updates from your software. Again, my experience has been sometimes that those things get put on the back burner because of the more pressing issues. You're putting out too many fires, but it's really important that these things be looked at as soon as possible. Work with your IT staff, make sure that you've got a handle on how things will change, because typically a small change in one of your programs, your integrations may have a big downstream impact on other areas. The other more pressing, sort of a near-term project here that needs to be looked at would be reporting the federal work study earnings to COD. That's a new requirement that needs to be completed before the end of the year. So The feds still haven't given us complete information on how we're supposed to do that. They're not accepting work study earnings at this point. So again, it's sort of hurry up and wait. But if you haven't worked with your IT staff and looked at the new layouts, you need to do that right away to be prepared for that December deadline. Next slide, please. And again, the 8 office works very closely with admissions and housing. Make sure you're communicating with those. A lot of schools have been sort of remiss as to how we're going to identify what the student housing situation will be. And the feds have made it very clear that you cannot, institutions cannot add a separate form to try to obtain student housing information. So many of the schools we've worked with are either adding a question on the admissions application. If your institution happens to be a residential school, many schools in that situation will be making the assumption or implying that all of our new freshmen have to live on campus. So we're going to give them the on-campus cost of attendance for housing. But the caveat with that would be that's perfectly legal. However, the school also needs to provide that student with an opportunity or make them aware that if their housing status is not on campus, they have to report back to the 8 office and then adjust the cost of attendance component for housing based on the student's response. The checklist has been mentioned, or even a project plan. It's very good to have that in plain sight for a couple of reasons. It helps identify key stakeholders, so that's not the financial aid office doing all the heavy lifting, even though most of it reside there. It's also helps people become more accountable. You can track things. You can make deadline dates or target dates. Make sure people are progressing toward those on a timely fashion. And it also just serves as a good overall reminder, sort of a progress report to show how you're doing on the requirements that you need to change for next year. We hope and we sort of pray that the new FAFSA will, by pulling more data from the IRS, will reduce some of the burden on the 8 office from a verification standpoint. However, given some of the other areas that are changing, 8 officers may be spending more time doing things like tracking down provisional independent students or working with professional judgments for students and parents who are impacted by the changes to family farms and number in college and businesses. But probably the biggest point I'd like to make, and as far as a takeaway, would be in order to receive your 24-25 FAFSAs, the new SAIG agreement has a question that actually requires you to attest, institutions to attest in writing, and that they're going to be fully compliant with all 9 safeguard rules and the new GLBA standards. And those are most of the partners I've worked with are beginning and working on those, but it does take some time to work through all those 9 safeguard rules. So be sure that you work with you alert your IT staff that these things have to be done, because again, from a compliance standpoint, if you submit that new agreement and you said you attest to them to all them being fully compliant, and then there's a review and you're found out of compliance, that may have some severe impact to your institution as far as citations and liability. Next slide, please. So again, from a dynamic campus standpoint, we work with lots of higher education institutions. We consider them to be our wonderful partners. We help with all these areas. We can help in mainly IT. That's our bread and butter. But again, we work in all the areas from a compliance standpoint. We're happy to assist schools and looking at your current process, seeing if there's some bottlenecks or some efficiencies we can help recommend and help you move along. Next slide, please. And as far as resources, the Department of Education has done a pretty good job of making sure that they're getting stuff out in sort of a timely fashion. We're listing some of the major electronic announcements here. Again, the first one related to the federal tax information. That will be another heavy lift for IT staff as far as making sure that's being secured properly. The general 2340 talks about the upgrade to your SAIG software, and again, that new mailbox that you'll need to have to receive the FAFSA data. General 2309 is the complete an unabridged version of all the updates, the GLBA and cybersecurity requirements that are currently going to be, you're going to be attesting to for your new agreement. Next slide, please. And again, we certainly feel that the schools that can begin working on this stuff now and dedicate some time to it will be much more successful in helping meet their enrollment goals for the upcoming school year. Certainly, schools are looking for some assistance, and you need either functional or technical support. Please feel free to contact us. We've been in the business for 20 years, and we have a number of schools that have recently joined partners with us because of FAFSA simplification, because it does, you know, I rarely find an aid office that is staffed adequately, and most aid officers have been working so hard that they cannot continue to do more with less as they have in the past. So the FAFSA simplification does offer sort of an opportunity to maybe branch out if you're interested in partnering with our institution. And I do have our contact information at the bottom of the slide there, so feel free to drop us a note or visit our website, or even contact me directly if you'd like. We're happy to help you. And if I can't provide a solution, we'll certainly put you in touch with someone who can. Next slide, please.
Kirk, thank you. And also, anybody can contact Campus Consortium Foundation, and we will get you connected to any of the panelists today. Last poll question, please, before everyone goes. Will FAFSA simplification impact reporting, regulation, and compliance efforts for your institution? What are you going to have to change in those reports? The data that is used for how you service students will likely change. So will that impact reporting, not just internally, but to agencies? Yes, minimally, or no, please? Just 30 seconds. And we'll move on to thanking our fantastic panelists. I really appreciate your experience, your insight, and your knowledge that you came to share with the education community today. We had hundreds of institutions that registered for this, and pretty close to that for attendees. So there's a great deal of interest in this, and you, I'm sure, helped a lot of people. Poll 5 says, will FAFSA simplification impact reporting? 84%, yes, significantly. So that's another project to add on the list. Minimally and no to a lesser extent, but looks like most folks, it'll be another task on the project plan. So again, thank you, panelists today. We will make sure that if anybody has any questions, we'll make the connections for you and make sure that you know, we will get you connected to the schools attendees that have questions. We didn't answer all the questions, so we're going to follow up. And we'll send you those. If you can weigh in on those, we'll send them out to the community. That would be fantastic. And so again, thank you, Callie, Carrie, Kirk, and of course our wonderful webinar audience as usual. Thank you so much for your attendance and your participation. Really adds to the conversation, and I hope that we helped everyone today. And of course, the fantastic event support team at Campus Consortium, Jennifer, Lily, Sam, Hector, and Harvey, as always, doing a great job with our webinars. Any questions you have for us, info@campusconsortium.org, and we'd love to help you. Thank you and have a great day. We'll send these slides out to everybody and look in the future for an EdTech report. Any last words, folks? Nope, good to go. All right. Have a great rest of the day.